Now, when it comes down to level of correction, and this is where majority of people struggle. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video. Today's video is about teaching you and giving you a better understanding of how to correct your dog for behaviors you may not want them to do. It is a big problem that people have. They are constantly struggling with a dog chewing on things or digging or barking, whatever it might be. And so today we're going to cover how to properly go about fixing that behavior so that way you're able to start moving forward and having better success with your dog. So there's a generalized list of stop it behavior. The generalized list is barking, digging, jumping on furniture, chewing on stuff they shouldn't, getting in the garbage, feet on the countertops, or chasing other animals. That list is going to be different for all different types of people out there as far as what behavior is acceptable and what isn't. But there's also two types of reasons out there that we would want to correct our dog. We want to ask ourselves, if our dog is doing an action, we have to ask ourselves, do we never want them to do that action, whether we're there or not? Or do we allow the action, but then when we deem it's no longer acceptable in the moment, that we're able to step in and tell them in a way that they understand and respect that now they have to stop that action. So, for example, you may never want your dog to ever chew on a shoe. So therefore, whether you're there or not, when you go to correct that dog, and the correction that I recommend, or the source of correction that I recommend using, is a remote. Now, I've got a lot of videos on how to use the remote properly. I highly recommend that you watch those. The links to these videos that I'm talking about will be down in the description. But I've got a video on how to correct your dog with a remote correctly and successfully and fairly. I've also got one on how to use our hand, which this isn't going to necessarily be the main source of correction for a lot of the behavior that we don't want our dogs to do. But also, I've got all kinds of videos as far as using the prong collar when it comes down to giving corrections and how to do it safely as well. And again, those links will be in the description down below. So when we're talking about correcting our dog with a remote, why do we correct our dog with a remote? It's because we want an extension of our hand to be able to make a correction at a distance. So if a dog is chewing on a shoe and you ask yourself, do I ever want my dog chewing on a shoe? If the answer is no, then the best way to go about it is to make the dog think that the shoe itself is making the correction. So for example, if you've ever touched an electric fence, you did not associate the stimulation from that electric fence with somebody else. You knew it came from the fence. And so therefore, the next time you see a fence, you're going to be a lot less likely to touch it, just in case it's hot. And so that's what we want to do with the dog. So whether it's getting in the garbage or barking out in the backyard or chewing on something that they shouldn't chew on, that is what it is we want to have happen, in the aspect that when we correct our dog, it's a 1001 release with the button, and they are associating that stimulation coming from the object and the action. So it is an association with action and object. So therefore, even when you're gone, your dog is going to avoid the shoe or avoid the garbage or avoid the countertops because it believes that it's those objects that are creating that. Now, in a situation where maybe you're cooking something on the stove and your burner is hot, if your dog goes to jump up on there and see what it is you're cooking and their foot hits that pot or that burner, they will never do it again because it's instant to the action and it's directly associated with the object. So again, you have to ask yourself when it comes to unwanted behavior, do I ever want my dog to do this, or can they do it sometimes? Now, if your answer is, well, sometimes they can do it. So for example, I don't care if my dogs are barking when they're inside the house. And the reason why is because I do want them alerting to me if we've got somebody trying to break in the middle of the night, or if somebody's coming onto the property and I don't know that they're there, but my dogs see them. If my dogs bark inside the house, I'm gonna go look and see what it is they're barking at to the best of my ability. And then if I deem that there is no threat, that's when I will give a marker, or I will tell my dog to be quiet. And then if they don't be quiet, or if they don't quiet, or if they don't stop the barking, that's when the correction comes. So therefore now they're associating the correction with the bark and me saying to stop. So therefore, if I'm not there to tell them stop, they will just bark until they deem that they don't need to bark anymore. But if I'm at the house and they start barking and I look and see there's no real threat, quiet. Now they stop, because they've learned that if once I say quiet and they don't stop, I'm gonna correct them. So that's the understanding behind all of this when it comes down to correcting our dogs. We have to always ask ourselves the question, do I sometimes want my dog to do it, or do I never want my dog to do it? And that is going to determine whether or not you associate yourself with the action and correction. So now, when it comes down to level of correction, and this is where majority of people struggle, a correction is only as good as the dog wanting to avoid it, or the punishment is only as good as the dog wanting to avoid it. So when we want a dog to stop a behavior, we have to find the level of correction that is just enough they want to avoid. And it's different for every animal. It's not determined by their size or their breed or anything like that. It's determined by their nerve structure. So, for example, you might have a dog that's super sensitive to stimulation. You don't have to give them very hard corrections then, or very high levels of correction, because they're incredibly sensitive to it. And then you might have other dogs that have a really high pain tolerance, and therefore they require a correction that may be uncomfortable for you to give. But when people ask me, how hard do I know to correct my dog? Your dog will always tell you. So, for example, if your dog's in the moment of barking and they have adrenaline rush, if their natural normal level of pain tolerance on a scale of 1 to 10 is a 5, but because of their adrenaline rush and in that moment it's a 7, that means we need to get them at a 7.5. It's just enough that they will want to avoid it in the future, but not enough to send them into panic. So if your dog is doing an action and you're having to correct them, and then they do the action and you correct them, and then 30 seconds later they do the action, all you're doing is nagging them. That is actually what we completely and totally want to stay away from, because then we're just correcting our dogs all the time. And so again, a punishment is only as good as the dog wanting to avoid it. So therefore we have to start at that low level and wait for our dog's actions to show us what level it was necessary in order for them to stop it. Not for a few minutes, but for a few hours maybe. And the more you do that, the longer and the more consistent you are, the longer between the times the dog is going to be doing those actions that cause the correction in the first place. So when you're in the process of trying to stop your dog from doing a bad behavior, just understand it does take consistency. If you correct your dog 8 times out of 10 attempts, all you're doing is teaching your dog that if you continue to try, you'll eventually get your way, because they're getting away with it twice in those 10 attempts. We want to do everything that we can to make sure that we are as consistent as possible, so therefore every single time they try it, they do not get away with it. In the beginning, what's going to happen is they're going to avoid the action to avoid the correction, but because of consistency, they will start to not even think about the action. And if they're not thinking about the action, they'll never do it. And that's our ultimate goal. So the last example I'm going to give you is this. When you're dealing with people that train horses, when they pull a horse, or they go to hitch a horse up to a hitching post and they wrap those reins around that hitching post, in the beginning the horse is going to be pulling against those reins. Well, because the reins never break, the horse never gets away, no matter how hard they try, there's going to be a point in time when their brain flips from I want to go do what I want to do to I see the reins out in front of me, I know for a fact I can't get away, so they mentally turn off. And the trainer is gonna see that when that happens, and the next thing you know, you've got people that can just lightly lay their reins over the hitching post or just do a single wrap and not have to worry about their horse going anywhere. So consistency is super important. Now, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I hope that you were able to learn something from this. And again, I wish the best for you and your dog as you move forward in the future. Thanks, and have a great day. Bye.